How's everybody? Doing well, all right. Good to see you all. Man, you guys are like really engaged over there. That's awesome. I have something that I want to share with you today that I think is going to pertain to lots of you. We have been going through the book of Ephesians. We've been going all summer. We're going to end it next week. And these last 2 weeks, we are going to deal with some heavy stuff. And so I want you to grab a Bible, and I want you to turn to Ephesians chapter 6, and it's page 980 in our church Bibles. If you have a recovery Bible, it is page 1517. Ephesians 6, page 980, or in the recovery Bibles, it is page 1517. So we're going to just read a paragraph beginning at verse 10 and talk about that paragraph today. And then we're going to finish that section and the book of Ephesians next Sunday. So here we go. I'm going to begin reading at verse 10 if you could follow along. A final word, be strong in the Lord. Say, be strong in the Lord. And in his mighty power. Say, mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against the strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. All right, that should be fun, huh? So we're going to start with our question today. Here it is. How have you experienced the darkness of the absence of God? How have you experienced some darkness in your life, a dark time perhaps you've been going through or have gone through in the past where God has felt absent? If you're new, we ask a question every week. People are invited to answer it. Helps us get started here. If you're interested in answering the question, get these guys' attention. They'll bring a microphone to you. You stand up, you speak directly in the mic, and give us a brief answer. Let's see if a few of you would be willing to be transparent and help us get started.
I'm Jan, and before I got into recovery for alcoholism, when I hit my bottom, it was the absolute most discouraging, depressing, and dark time in my life. Alcohol wasn't working anymore. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where to go. And God intervened and brought me into recovery. And but at that time, I thought God was really absent from my life because I felt really abandoned by the God that I thought that I knew, that I grew up with. But he had other plans for me, and I'm really grateful for that.
Thanks, Jan. Who else willing to share today?
Hi, I'm Missy. I have depression, so just in the diagnosis of depression, there's just been some times I've been really down where I've just kind of felt empty and hopeless and helpless, and those are some very dark times. And then a couple other times that I've just been in a really dark spot is when people that I've cared about have died way too early. One was by suicide and one was by car crash, and that kind of spiraled me down into some pretty dark places as well.
Thanks, Missy.
Hello, I'm Carla, and my darkest time would have to be a year ago when I lost my oldest son. He was 29 years old to a massive heart attack. It had to be the worst, and I've never felt so alone in my life.
Thanks, Carla.
I'm a Heidi. A year ago today, I was fighting every demon possible. I took a point of heroin and a half gram of meth, and I tried to kill myself, and by the grace of God, it didn't work. But I was losing my dad, and I'm pretty sure that's probably the hardest thing I'm ever going to go through in my life, because he was always there. My mom died when I was a month old, and I struggled real bad with my addiction for the last probably 24 months. But by the grace of God, I'm in treatment now, and I'm trying to get it one day at a time.
Thanks, Heidi. Anybody else? Do one more if anybody else wants to share. All right. Well, we'll wrap up there then. Oh, way over there. You can run over there, and then we'll make that the last one. So you can wrap up.
Good morning. I experienced the darkness literally. I woke up in the middle of a house fire when I shouldn't have lived, and all I remember is the dark. I couldn't see my hand. I couldn't see anything, and all I felt was how to get out.
Thanks, Heather. All right. So thank you for those answers, and I love the transparency. If you're new, transparency is a core value here, and we want everybody to feel like they're able to share part of their story, because we all go through stuff, right? We all go through stuff. In my last church, a little over 8 years ago, I preached a message on these verses from Ephesians chapter 6. I talked about the reality of evil in our world, and that there is a devil, and there are spiritual forces that seek to turn us away from God. There is a spiritual battle that is real here, and there are these forces or demons that can have power over our lives if we allow them to. After church, a man who had been in our church for quite a number of years, a man who was a personal friend, came up to me, and he actually said these words. He said, "Pastor, are you blowing smoke up my ass?" Yes, I even had raw conversations with church people back then. And I said, don't you believe in good or positive spiritual forces for things like healing? He was a doctor, actually. And he said, yeah, of course I do. Then I said, well, how can it be that much of a stretch to believe in evil or darker spiritual forces? Several months later, my friend, in dealing with his own demons, took his life. And at his funeral, I said that he had succumbed to the very demons that he had so much trouble accepting as real. What only a few people realized at the time was that I was dealing with my own demons as well, and my own spiritual battle. Over the years of such traumatic losses as I had gone through with my friend, and the weight of ministry, I had literally just kind of burned myself out. And I was medicating with alcohol, and it was beginning to take control over me. And my world was turning darker and darker and darker. And my days and my life and my ministry had become all about survival, just trying to get through each day. Does anybody here know what I'm talking about? All right. So I'm going to level with you this morning. You would have a very hard time convincing me that the devil is not real, that evil does not exist, or that there are not spiritual forces seeking to separate you and me from God. What I don't totally or fully understand is how much of it is of the devil and how much of it is really my own doing. That's the hard part, because I struggle with sin every day. And 9 out of 10 times, I really don't need the devil to help me. I'm pretty capable of sinning all by myself. Turn and tell someone I get that. Sometimes people will tell me that I don't believe in God because of all the bad and the evil going on in the world. And honestly, I don't know how you understand the evil and the pain of the world or the atrocities that we've experienced over history without seeing that there is a spiritual battle going on against mighty powers that sometimes we see and sometimes we kind of know they are there, but we don't actually see them. As we have heard in our question time today, many of you also have experienced some dark realities in your life. Sometimes I say that I don't have to convince many people here at Lighthouse of the reality of hell because many of us have already been there and we really don't want to go back. Anybody want to say amen to that? Amen. And so here's the first thing that I want you to know, that if you believe in good, if good, then evil. I think that'll be on the screen, Julie, if you are back there. If good, then bad or evil. That those kind of go hand in hand. If you believe in God, then you probably believe that there is something that tends to oppose God, because it just kind of seems that way in not only this world, but in our daily lives. I want you to know this morning that I believe that the devil is real. And so did you notice I didn't tell a joke? Okay, here's my joke. Saved it for now. It's my favorite devil joke. Sorry if you've heard it. I've told it before, but it's my favorite, so I had to pull it out. Here we go. A few minutes before the church service started, the townspeople were sitting in their pews talking, and suddenly Satan appeared at the front of the church. Everyone started screaming and running for the front entrance, trampling each other in a frantic effort to get away from the devil. Soon everyone had exited the church except for one elderly gentleman who sat calmly in his chair without moving, seeming oblivious to the fact that the devil was in his presence. So Satan walks up to the old man and he says, "Don't you know who I am?" Man replied, "Yep, sure do." "Aren't you afraid of me?" Satan asked. "Nope, sure ain't," the old man said. "Don't you realize that I can kill you with a single word?" asked Satan. "Don't doubt it for a minute," the old man said. "Did you know that I could cause you profound, horrifying physical agony for all eternity?" Satan said. "Yep," the man said calmly. "And you're still not afraid of me?" "Nope." Satan looked at the old man and he said, Why aren't you afraid of me?" The man said, "Because I've been married to your sister for 48 years. Chris, that was a good joke. Where are you going? Just stayed for the joke, man. So, we joke and we laugh, but I know that there are some of you who have stared in the face of evil and the devil. And that some of you here today have experienced the reality of what we're talking about. And so if that's you, I want you to hang with me this morning because we're going to talk a little bit about not only the reality, the characteristics of the devil or of evil, but we're also going to talk about what Paul has to say about it and how we can stand stronger in the face of that. All right? And so I want to go back to Ephesians, where Paul says, put on the armor of God. Put on the armor of God so that you can, our art attack, stand firm against the devil. And first thing that I wanted to share is that it reminded me that in the book of Ephesians, we had already had a phrase, put on something. That Paul has already talked about putting on something. It's actually back in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 24, where Paul said this. Why don't you read it with me? Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. And so we've talked about how over these last months, we've talked about how when we come to faith in Jesus Christ, we begin to experience a new reality in our life. that we have this new nature, that God's grace through Jesus Christ changes us. And one of the things I like to do often is I like to stand up here and I have you kind of imagine yourself as this changed person, that I'm here today, but I used to be here, right? So this was my old person, and I kind of know what I was like before I met Jesus or before God had been working in my life. That was me, but now I'm here, right? Well, here's the reality that God, through Jesus Christ, will continue to work changes in your life. He's always seeking to create a new person. So Paul says, put on that new person. But what I want you to know today is that the devil always wants you back to the old person. That there's always going to be something that's pulling you back to that old person on this side of heaven. Because it's just the world we live in. We still live in a sinful world, and there's going to be those pulls to go back. Satan wants you to be that sick person, that old person, the person before Jesus started to make changes in your life. And if you haven't really kind of equated that we always live in that tension, let me demonstrate it for you. How many of you know that if you were content with what you had, and that you didn't really covet other things or what other people had, that your life would be better? How many of you believe that? Okay, well, not a lot of you, but let me tell you, your life would be better if you didn't covet. So if you raised your hand, you know that your life would be better if you didn't covet, other things, if you were content with what you had. How many of you covet anyway? Okay, why? Because we live in this tension. And so what I want you to know is that if you are here because you are seeking something different in your life, praise the Lord, you've come to the right place. But I want you to know that there is a devil, that there are these spiritual forces that are going to be pulling you back. In heaven there will no longer be this tension, but while we're here, we still live in it. The devil wants you back. In our Lighthouse family, we have a lot of people I know, especially at this service, who are open about how they have become powerless over their addictions or their compulsive behaviors. That on our own, we will not be able to navigate life in a sane way, but God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And that's the promise that we have. The devil knows our weaknesses, but we have the strength of the Lord. And so I want you to know that the devil will speak lies to you, that will seek to entice you back. Some of the lies, maybe you've heard your whole life, like you are worthless, like you have no value, like you can't do anything right, that you're a failure. Other lies kind of go along with the weaknesses that we experience. Like I remember when I was trying to find recovery, I remember having these thoughts, you know what? I don't think I'm an alcoholic. I think I could drink reasonably again. Anybody here ever experienced those kind of thoughts? Yeah. And so, the devil is always trying to pull us back. In Ephesians 6:10, it says, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. So I want to give you a little lesson on that. I went back to the Greek. The Greek, which the New Testament was written in. And I came across the word endunumostha. I have trouble pronouncing it because I took Greek like over 30 years ago when I was in second grade. It was a long time ago. And endunumostha is a Greek word for what Paul says, be strong. What Paul is saying is endumostha in the Lord and in his mighty power. And what it means is to empower. But here's the interesting thing. In Ephesians chapter 6:10, it's a passive verb. And so in the Greek, what that means is that the empowering is something that is done to us. It's not something that we do. So we often read that and we think, be strong in the Lord. And what Paul is saying is suck it up. Be stronger in the things that you face. And what Paul is actually saying is draw closer to God and draw your power from him. You with me? So what he's saying is that you probably can't do this battle on your own. So get closer to your Lord and let Him be the strength that you need. You know, it's almost counterintuitive, but what Paul is saying is surrender. Is that familiar language, anybody? Surrender yourself and let God do for you what you can't do for yourself. Paul himself says, when I am weak, then I am strong. It's also, interestingly, in the present tense, this verb is, which means that the empowering is continual. It keeps coming. So what Paul is saying is that the empowering is by Christ's strength, and we are drawing ourselves close to Him. That we get empowered when we are close to Jesus Christ. And I want you to know that that was certainly true for me. That in my own life I experienced that Jesus is light, even in the midst of my darkness, but it took me a while. I've shared with some of you before that there was a period in my life when I was struggling with my addiction and my depression. I remember being in my home alone in the basement, and it was dark, and it felt cold, and it was about as close to despair and giving up as I ever felt. And I didn't so much see the face of evil, but I experienced the absence of God. God seemed to be nowhere. Anybody here ever experienced that? God seemed to be nowhere. Now here's the deal. I've known and I've loved Jesus my whole life. And yet what had happened in my life is I had shut Him out. I had shut Him out and began to, in my daily life, walk away from Him. And I experienced a dark time. So what I want to do is I want to spend just the next few minutes talking a little bit about this sense of evil that we encounter, this sense of darkness that we go through. And then next week we're going to talk about the armor of God that Paul talks about next. So let me share a few things that I pray and I hope are helpful to you. Number one, darkness equals the absence of God most of the time. Most often we are going to experience darkness and evil as the absence of God. Not that we're not going to see maybe demons or the face of evil, but I think oftentimes for us, darkness is going to be equated with the absence of God. Because the devil wants to separate us from God. In John chapter 8, verse 12, it says this. Why don't you read it with me? Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness, because you will have the light that leads to life. The closer I am to Jesus, the more light that shines in my life. The further I am away from Jesus, the darker my life is. And frankly, the more stupid decisions I make. So if I believe and I trust in Jesus, I'm going to work on a living and a daily relationship with Him. If you are searching spiritually, or if you are looking for some light to shine in your darkness, I want to encourage you to try Jesus. Try Jesus. So what things draw us close? Well, we'll talk about the armor next week, but let me just give you a heads up of a few things. A healthy church and going to church on a regular basis draws us close to Jesus. I have found that in the singing and the worship, that there is an opportunity for me to be close to Jesus and for Him to draw close to me. We're going to end our service, I think, with a couple of songs that I hope are powerful and give you the presence of Jesus in a way that may empower you through the rest of this week, or at least through the rest of this day. I encounter people sometimes who come to church and they walk in and they kind of take a deep breath, and it's like they're experiencing, kind of a release of some of the stress or the anxiety or even the darkness of the world that they're living in. And so that's what the body of Christ is meant to be, whether it's in the fellowship or in the worship or just kind of life in community. If this is all true, then I would want to be in the church and in the body of Christ, learning and growing and fellowshipping more than just Sunday mornings. That would be just me. The Bible is also an opportunity for us to experience the closeness of Christ. In Psalm 119, verse 105, it says this. You can read it with me on the screen. Your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. So if that's true, I would want to study the Bible. I would want to read the Bible devotionally. I would want to learn from others, and I would want to grow in my faith. Prayer as a daily connection to God does this for me, that I can have a daily conversation with God as I go through my life, that it's all about relationship and our relationship with the Lord. So if you are struggling, chances are you've separated yourself from the Lord in some way. Okay, let's go on. Number 2. Fear God, not the devil. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 5, or chapter 5, verse 8 says this. Read it with me. Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Now that sounds kind of ominous, doesn't it? Well, here in James chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, he says this. Read it with me. So humble yourselves before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and God will come close to you. In other words, we can learn to resist the devil. We can learn to resist the temptations that he throws at us. I had to learn to take captive my thoughts and turn them over to Christ, to say a prayer when I was struggling or when I was tempted by the lies that I would sometimes tell myself or Satan would speak to me. Also, I want you to know this, number 3, the devil only has power that unbelief gives to him. Chapter 10 of 1 Corinthians, verse 13 says this. Read it with me. The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. So there's always a way out, that we never experience anything that you and God together can't handle. The devil only has the power that you give him. Number 4, it is our inattention to life that will give the devil a foothold. That was my sin, I want you to know. My inattention to the struggles I was going through, the decisions that I was making, the separation I was encountering from God, and the decision to self-medicate with alcohol. It is our inattention to life that will give the devil a foothold. Ephesians 4 talks about this. We already read one of the verses, verse 24. Why don't you read this with me? Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. Stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body, and don't let sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. So I just wanted to get to that last place there, because here it says that anger can give the devil a foothold, but I want you to know that anger is just one of the things that can give the devil a foothold in your life. So I want to ask you the question, what in your life today is giving the devil a foothold? What in your life is giving the devil a foothold? What might be separating you from God? It doesn't take the devil much. For some, it might be a substance use. For others, a mental illness. You didn't ask for a mental illness, but you make decisions every day that impact how your mental illness is influencing your life. For others, it might be fear or anger or a relationship. What is giving the devil a foothold? In community, we come to experience support in what we're going through. So good job being here today. Last thing that I want to share, and then we're gonna sing a little bit, is number 5. Remember that though you are in a battle, the war is already done. The war is already won. And while on this earth, we're going to fight battles, but God has already won the war. Through Jesus Christ and his death on the cross, the victory is won. And God has the final word. And I want you to hear that and know that if you've hung with me this long. You may feel like you're in a dark place today. Anybody feel like they're in a dark place? You may feel like you're facing a giant that is too great for you to conquer. And if that's you, I just want you to know that you do not have to fight the battle you're facing alone. That that you can draw close to Jesus and draw your strength not from your own abilities, but from Him. That He is here, that He loves you, even in your dark place or even in your mess. And that this day, His strength and your power can sustain you, it can surround you, and it can carry you not only through this day, but through this week in a way that will continue to walk with Christ as He creates the new person He's working on. Would you stand and sing a couple of songs with me?